Today we're going to talk about adding and subtracting fractions. We're going to do an easy problem of each kind, and then we're going to do a more difficult that might involve regrouping or borrowing. So we'll start with adding fractions, and we'll do a basic one, 1/4 plus 3/8. And I always stack my fractions up, and you'll see we move across horizontally, and it just kind of keeps everything neat and in order. So the biggest thing that you need to know when we are adding fractions, we have to have the same denominator. So the denominator must be the same. Not optional. Okay, so here I do not have the same denominator, so I need to figure out something I can use. And based on what we learned last week, we can actually use the least common multiple of my two denominators to find the common denominator. So the least common denominator for 4 and 8 would actually be 8. So I'm going to basically make both of my denominators 8. In this fraction, because the denominator didn't change, or it just multiplied by 1, I would do the same to the top. That's not going to change either, so this is going to be 3/8. Because this did change, 4 times 2 is 8, I have to do the same to the top. 1 times 2 is 2. So what that says is that 2/8 is equivalent to 1/4. I've written an equivalent fraction, but now I have the same denominator, so I can go ahead and add. So when I add 2/8 plus 3/8, I'm going to add my top two numerators. So 2 plus 3 is 5, and then my denominator stays the same. So my answer would be 5/8. My second example is going to be a little bit trickier. I'm going to use 3/5 plus 2/3. So in this case, my least common denominator, or my least common multiple for these, is going to be 15. So I'm going to multiply 5 times 3 to get 15, which means I have to do the same to the top. 3 times 3 is 9. On the bottom, 3 times 5 is 15. 2 times 5 is 10. So now I can add because my denominators are the same. 9 plus 10 is 19. My denominator is 15. Now, my problem's not done here because we are always going to simplify our answer, which means if it's just a normal fraction, we would just reduce it until it couldn't be reduced anymore. Because this is improper, which means my top number, my numerator, is bigger than my denominator, I have to actually make this a mixed number, which means it's going to be greater than 1 whole. There's a couple of ways you can do this. I prefer the division way, but I will show you both. So the first way is to look and say that you know that if the numerator and the denominator of a number are the same number, that equals 1. So I could actually remove 15/15 because this is equal to 1 whole, and I'd be left with 4/15, which means that 19/15 would be equal to the 1 that I removed and then the 4 left over. So there's your 1 and 4/15. That's one way you can do that. The other way we can do it, and I will just use my black pen for this, is to divide. And I'm always going to divide when I have a fraction, the denominator into the numerator. So I have 15 divided by 19. 15 is going to go into 19 one time. You're going to have a remainder of 4. This is my whole number. My remainder becomes my numerator, and my denominator would stay the same. So there's my 1 and 4/15. So either way you divide, you would get the same answer. Either way you simplify, you get the same answer. But you basically need to be making this into a mixed number. Alright, we're going to go to the back side to do our subtracting fractions. And again, we're going to do an easier one and then a more difficult one. So with our subtracting fractions, I'll start with an easy one. So I have 7/8. Oh, I'll do it under here. Minus 1/4. Okay, same rule applies as it did in addition. You have to have a common denominator. So if the denominators are not the same, we cannot subtract. So I'm going to use the common denominator of 8. This did not change, it just multiplied by 1. So 7/8, and I do 4 times 2 to get 8. 1 times 2 is 2. So now I have 7/8 minus 2/8. 7 minus 2 is 5. My denominator stays the same. So I have 5/8 as my answer. The next problem is a little bit trickier because we're actually going to have to borrow. Just like we borrow in regular subtraction, okay, we're going to have to borrow in this one. So my problem is going to be 3 and 1/4, so this is just a mixed number. And whenever we add or subtract mixed numbers on a normal basis, we're just going to deal with the fraction. So you would just add your whole numbers like normal or subtract your whole numbers like normal. This will be a different scenario because we're going to have to borrow from the whole number. But if you don't have to borrow, which means you could subtract normally, then you would just subtract that way. First step, always common denominator. So my whole number's not going to change, but it's going to be 3 and something over 8 and 1 and something over 8. Okay, this didn't change, so this isn't going to change either, so that'll still be 1 and 5/8. 4 times 2, 1 times 2 is 2. So here's where my problem is. Now I have 3 and 2/8 minus 1 and 5/8. I'm fine to do 3 minus 1. Where I'm not fine is to do 2/8 minus 5/8 because I can't take away 5/8 from 2/8. I don't have enough. So I'm going to have to borrow. If this was just a normal, if this was 7/8 or whatever, we could just subtract like normal. But because it's not, I have to borrow. So what we're going to borrow from is our whole number. I'm going to cross out my 3, and I'm going to write that it's going to be 2 and 8/8. I chose to use 8 because it's already my denominator. 8/8 is equal to 1 whole. Anytime the numerator and the denominator are the same, it equals 1 whole. So 8/8 is equal to 1 whole. So 2 plus 1 whole is equal to the 3 that I'm using. So I just basically replaced my 3 with a 2 and then 1 whole written as a fraction using the denominator I already had. So when I kind of transfer this over, I'm going to have to add my 8/8 to my 2/8. So I'll have 2 plus 8 plus 2 is 10. 2 and 10/8. Yes, this is improper. It's supposed to be. It's improper so that we can use it to subtract. That's okay. So I took 2 and 8/8, I added to my 2/8, I got 2 and 10/8. 2 and 10/8 minus 1 and 5/8. Now I can subtract like normal. 10/8 minus 5/8 is going to be 5/8. 2 minus 1 would be 1. So my answer to this problem would be 1 and 5/8. I could always check that by doing the reverse operation, which would be to add it if we needed to. If I wasn't sure and I just wanted to make sure that I had the right answer, I could do that to double check. Because I'm fairly confident in that, I don't need to, but if you are ever not positive, go ahead and double check your answer. So that is adding and subtracting fractions. Good luck.